Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a really fascinating topic, jumpers for goalposts, how football sold its soul. We're basically going on a journey to explore a massive, seismic shift in the beautiful game.
We're tracking how a sport, once totally defined by local loyalty and raw, unfiltered passion, transformed into, well, a data-driven corporate juggernaut. Think about a classic, heavy, worn-out leather boot compared to today's shiny, aerodynamic, ultra-high-tech footwear. That stark contrast really hits the nail on the head for what we're talking about today. It silently begs the question, in the rush to upgrade the equipment, the mega stadiums, and those billion-dollar broadcast rights, did something intangible just get lost along the way?
You know, the source material we're analyzing points out that the soul of football is an incredibly tricky thing to define. It's definitely not something you can just quantify on a spreadsheet. Instead, it starts with these deeply nostalgic, innocent images. The authors describe it so well. They say the essence of the game brings up memories like orange ones on snow-covered pitches. It's that visceral childhood memory of when we first fell head over heels for the game. Long before any of us knew a thing about wage bills or television rights, it's just the pure, unadulterated sport.
So since you obviously can't just capture a sport's soul in a bottle, how do we even tackle such an abstract concept? Well, the authors introduced this brilliant idea of assembling a curated Soul of Football 11. By putting together an absolute dream team of specific historic players, we can actually physically define these idealistic values. We get to look at the very men who embodied the essence of what made the sport so magical in the first place.
Just picture a charmingly innocent, vintage 2-3-5 formation. That wasn't just picked out of a hat. It represents a totally bygone era of all-out attack and pure entertainment. This specific selection of players, managed by the impossibly cool Cesar Luis Menotti, by the way, represents the elementary qualities of football's soul. Now, we don't have time to cover every single legend on this pitch today, but we are going to spotlight a few to understand exactly what kind of values they brought to the beautiful game.
Let's kick things off with the goalkeeper Bert Trautmann. If there's one single pillar of the game's historic identity, it's physical courage. And wow, Trautmann redefined this concept entirely. He famously played in an FA Cup final for Manchester City with a broken neck. Yeah, you heard that right, a literal broken neck. He represents an era where players endured just staggering physical hardships simply for the honor of competing. It is arguably the single most jaw-dropping act of bravery in football history, and it sets an incredible standard for the soul of the game.
And that leads us right into another absolute core value, style. Danny Blanchflower, the captain of Tottenham Hotspur's legendary double-winning side back in 1961, had this incredibly visionary philosophy. He famously said, "The great fallacy is that the game is first and last about winning. It's nothing of the kind. The game is about glory. It's about doing things in style, with a flourish." He actually believed you shouldn't just wait for the opponent to die of boredom. To him, football wasn't just about money or grinding out a 1-0 victory. It was a true art form.
Then we have Matt Letizia, who brings a completely different yet equally vital piece to the puzzle. Just consider his career details for a second. We're talking about a basic wage that never went over £3,900 a week at Southampton, an absolutely profound sense of local loyalty, and a confessed diet that regularly featured a KFC bargain bucket. Letizia was just a normal bloke with an abnormal genius. He proved that simple happiness, approachability, and sticking by your community used to far outweigh the cutthroat ambition and immense wealth that drives the transfer market today.
So, when we put all these pieces together, a really clear picture of the game's soul starts to emerge. We have John Charles, this giant of a man who is so scrupulously fair he'd famously kick the ball out of play rather than score if an opponent was injured. We have Sir Bobby Robson, whose absolute generosity of spirit and just pure love for the game made him universally respected. And, jumping to the modern era, we even have Lionel Messi. He's included here because despite being a massive global superstar, he still plays with the humble, childlike joy of a kid in the park. Fairness, selfless devotion, and genuine joy, these are the historic hallmarks of football's greatest figures.
Okay, but here is where we need to shift gears a bit. We're moving away from the warm, fuzzy nostalgia of the past and into some cold, hard history. The year is 1992. This is the staging post that historians and diehard fans alike point to as the definitive end of football's innocence. It's the point of no return, really, the moment where the game was offered an indecent proposal of extreme commercialization and, well, it accepted.
To really grasp the weight of 1992, we've got to look back for a second, because this commercialization didn't just happen overnight. It actually started way back in 1885 with the professionalization of the sport. Then, in 1961, a major shift hit when the maximum player wage of £20 a week was finally lifted. Fast forward to 1983, and Tottenham Hotspur floated on the London Stock Exchange, which was a massive first in sport. But 1992, that was the watershed moment. That's the year the European Cup rebranded as the shiny new Champions League, and the English top flight broke away to form the Premier League, totally fueled by billions in satellite television money from broadcasters like Sky. This timeline shows the slow but steady transfer of power from the local communities right into corporate bank accounts.
And that brings us perfectly into the era of living the commercial dream. Get ready, because we are about to look at the staggering reality of modern football's hyperinflation. The massive influx of broadcasting billions completely transformed clubs from local community assets into highly calculated, data-driven corporate giants. And the absolute most visible symptom of this transformation, for sure, it's the transfer market.
Just look at this direct comparison to see what I mean. In 1992, Kenny Dalglish invested a British record fee in a highly promising 22-year-old center forward named Alan Shearer. The cost back then, £3.3 million. 19 years later, in 2011, Dalglish again invested in a 22-year-old center forward, this time Andy Carroll. Two incredibly similar player profiles, right? But Carroll cost £35 million. Now, even if you adjust for normal, everyday economic inflation, $3.3 million at 1992 would only equal about $5.2 million in 2011. So this just perfectly illustrates the sheer, unadulterated absurdity of football's financial inflation.
So to really drive this home, the whole thing can be summarized by one single, absolutely staggering number: 2,493%. That is the percentage increase in the total wage bill of English top-flight clubs between the 1991-92 season, the very last season before the Premier League, and the 2009-2010 season. In just under 2 decades, wages didn't just grow, they exploded exponentially. It's wild, and it fundamentally altered the competitive balance of the entire sport. Suddenly, without spending astronomical sums, achieving success became virtually impossible.
And you know, the business off the pitch now frequently overshadows the actual game on it. Take Barcelona. This is a club that famously prided itself on having absolutely zero corporate sponsors on its shirt for 107 years. But eventually, even they signed a €1660 million deal with Qatar. Or look at Manchester City, who sold their stadium naming rights to Etihad for over £400 million. And perhaps the most symbolic of all, back in 1998, Manchester United quietly just removed the words football club from their official crest. It really shows how traditional club identities are being erased, or at least heavily monetized, to service these giant global commercial empires. But hey, it's not just the clubs and the players making an absolute fortune here. A massive 13% of all the money spent in English professional football goes directly into the pockets of agents. Think about that for a second. These are intermediaries, people who never touch a ball, never score a brilliant goal, and never make a last-ditch tackle, extracting vast sums of wealth from the sport simply for negotiating contracts and facilitating transfers. It's a really stark indicator of how the financial ecosystem of football has evolved to prioritize commerce at literally every single level.
Which brings us to a final, pretty provocative thought straight from our source material. As we weigh the unbelievable wealth, the pristine new mega stadiums, and the flawless high-def broadcast packaging against the loss of local loyalty, the staggering financial inequality, and the hyper-commercialization, we kind of have to ask, if you look modern football hard in the face, is it dead behind the eyes? Has that idealistic, pure soul we explored at the beginning of this explainer been entirely lost in the relentless pursuit of wealth? Honestly, it's a profound question that every single fan has to answer for themselves. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.